Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We'll get started on our second panel of the day, which has the title Sport Matters. And what we're going to be addressing in this panel is, I think, almost the question, does sport matter? In other words, if we have this phenomenon of indoor skydiving, we have the phenomenon of the wind, or whatever it's called, and we have this phenomenon of the wind tunnel, the facility that people can use. The use that's put to, how is it defined, how will it evolve, and does it matter, and how do our panelists see that? I'll introduce the people that we have here. Starting on my immediate right, I have Ivars of Aerodium, a manufacturer who's joined us from Latvia, come in from Latvia for this, which we're very grateful for. Paul Mayer from England, who was with Bedford Body Flight ex-Twinwoods, but he's still with flight instructor, and he was involved with creating that facility up there in England about 15 years ago, and now is involved more in the flight instructor, tunnel instructor venture. Simon, of course, you know from the previous panel. Thank you for joining us again. Same to Patrice. We're going to start this panel with David. We're going to start this panel with a video. Are we ready to go? Yes. Yeah. We're going to. This is a really good one. It's with Jochen Schweizer. It was filmed in Munich for this event. Jochen, those of you who are German speakers would know, is a popular figure, a well-known figure in Germany. 2 primetime shows on German television. He is a brand. He's built an empire of an experience business empire, and he has some very interesting things to say on the big picture of this industry. So if we could roll this now, we'll see the video with Jochen Schweizer.
We are using both brands. For online marketing, for example, we definitely bid on indoor skydiving, but we are also using body flying. It doesn't really matter, to be honest, because you will find us whether brand you use. So if you search for body flying or if you search for indoor skydiving, you will find Jochen Schweizer. I'm a skydiver myself, so indoor skydiving, that appeals to me. On the other hand, seeing body flying as a new sport, as a new activity, and not being connected to skydiving, and 90% of our customers who arrive here, they got no connection to skydiving yet. I would say yet. Then it might make sense to call it body flying. Then, from the few of those customers seeking for experiences, and we are selling more than 1 million experiences per year, for those who come for the experience, then it's body flying. Experimental sites opened like in Eilat, Israel, or the one I've been flying long time ago in the 80s in the USA. We were all skydivers, and we thought, hey, that's great that you can fly stationary and get a lot of airtime. And then with the better tunnels being developed, we see it pretty much also as a training instrument for better and safer skydiving. This is the view from the skydiving side. If I compare it with the wind tunnel, I would not automatically say that people who come here to experience it would say, oh, I want to experience that in the blue skies. So there is a different step in between, because coming here, first time flyer, a certain percentage is getting hooked. And then they become what we call them semi-professionals. So they train They learn how to fly. They experience flight movement. They experience their first choreographies. They might participate in their first indoor skydiving events. But for them, it's body flying. It has nothing to do with skydiving. And from there, even a smaller percentage, they come to the conclusion, now I want to experience it once in the blue skies, and they will go for an AFF course, and then they will be very happy, certainly. But for me, it all started with skydiving. I would say that 95% of the people coming out of the tunnel, they got this happy smile in their faces, and that makes me happy. You see the marks from the goggles in their faces, and then you see the big smiles of the people, and that makes me totally happy. This is why I'm doing it, by the way. But for them to come back, they have to overcome the threshold of finance, because it's not a cheap experience. Indoor skydiving or body flying, from the view of our major clientele, it's body flying, not indoor skydiving. From their point of view, it's a rather expensive experience. For them to come back takes financial means, and there is natural limits to bring down the price, which is the cost of energy, the cost of stuff, and so on. At the end, it will lead to I would call it a very fine community of what I call semi-pro body flyers, because they are not coming from skydiving. And let me try to differentiate between indoor surfing, indoor climbing, and indoor skydiving. I always, as an experience marketer, come from the experience. This is why I call it body flying. Still, I call it indoor surfing. We didn't find a better brand so far. You could call it stationary wave riding, but that doesn't appeal to me really. It's not a cool brand. So indoor surfing and surfing itself is a soul sport and got a lot of spirit.
Well, if we just pick up on the most obvious thing that Jochen Schweizer had to say there, terminology, nomenclature. Does this matter to you? What you call it, because it is the brand that you're building ultimately for what it is that you are doing. But Simon, what is your view on that? Do you think it matters?
Who cares a shit?
Okay, doesn't matter.
Of course it matters, but at the same time it doesn't matter. And I think Jochen almost hit it there. We get so wound up about whether we're body flying or indoor skydiving. Just call it names that people can associate with and just get into. And so far, that seems to just fall on indoor skydiving. So,
Okay.
We're not skydiving.
Right.
But, we'll take it.
But does it help with the differentiation? Because you said before in the earlier panel that you saw the indoor, the wind tunnel, as being something distinct from skydiving.
I do,
wouldn't
but
it
it
help with the differentiation to call it something else?
But body flying is such an awkward name.
Well, it is. Yeah.
And if you go into the Japanese, the way they name with syllables, body flying is sort of all soft syllables. And whereas indoor skydiving, people have got a vision in their mind, and it's just easy to go with. If we need to change it one day, but
it's the path of least resistance. In other words, just call it indoor skydiving. But then that brings with it. We have on here Sport Matters as the name of this. It does imply that there is a sport element to what it is that you are doing. How important is that sport element, and also define what that means, sport element, to having the wind tunnel experience? In other words, does it mean rules? Is that what sport is, rules? To what it is that you do? Paul?
I think it probably comes down to experience level as much as the actual sport itself. With simpler sports, you can pick up a table tennis bat and you can start to play almost straight away. With something like indoor skydiving, you've got to put a lot of time and money into developing skills before you could even start to think about being at a competition level. So converting an experience flyer, somebody that comes along just for a go, into somebody that's actually got the skills to compete, is a reasonably expensive and long journey, and one that they've got to be quite committed to do. So I think that's probably the hurdle.
And what sort of time frame are we talking about? I mean, how long would you have to spend in a wind tunnel to become good enough to actually to do elementary level competition?
I mean, if you used to look at a belly competition where you're doing formations, then somebody that's done 6 to 10 hours of tunnel time would be a competent belly flyer that can start to compete. But yeah, it takes people time to get to that point, and
so
also the connections and if you're going along to a venue that for an experience, actually associating with other people, having that club environment, that networking ability to bring you into a competition, it needs to be there as well.
6 to 10 hours, if I could, Patrice just jumped to, because we were talking about indoor and outdoor before, 6 to 10 hours in a wind tunnel. How long, in terms of outdoor skydiving, to get to 6 to 10 hours of experience, how long a process would that be?
What do you mean exactly?
Well, he said 6 to 10 hours in a wind tunnel.
Well, it depends on what you are doing. If you are flat or if you want to fly in 3D, it depends also if you are just doing indoor or if you are doing both indoor or outdoor. It depends on all this matter. I cannot guarantee that I will give you a number of jumps, but I can tell you that some people are very, very, very good, and they are very successful. In 200 jumps, they can, as somebody told yesterday, I will explain that in another session, that in 200 jumps you can be a part of a team. In the indoor, if you are doing flat, you can be involved in competition depending on the level of the competition. If it's a small competition, then you can be a part, even if you make some mistake. If you're talking about the top, we share, I say we, because I came from outdoor, but outdoor and indoor, they share one thing: it's expensive. Whatever you want to do, it's expensive. On the beginning, it was less expensive for outdoor to train in indoor because they have more chance to train when they want, when it's bad weather, whatever. But now it's a product by itself, it's a sport by itself, and all the best they want to, like you said yesterday, and I think it's, Wayne, you say that 30% instructors of the competition, which is mean that you need to be in the tunnel and to work a lot for your body fly, your body abilities, to grab and to be one of the best. But indoor, outdoor, it's not the subject. Look, in Emporia Brava, you go to the drop zone and just to make a fight in the wind tunnel. So you have the drop zone and the wind tunnel at the same time. So,
would it, and then this becomes a more tricky question, maybe we'll hold that for a second, but because we get into the subject of how you package it. You mentioned club, and you mentioned clubs. Sports traditionally, when we think of sports structure, certainly for team sports, you need to be, in Europe anyway, but for many sports, you need to belong to a club or you need to be affiliated. I think in France you probably need to be affiliated, not for indoor, but you would certainly for parachuting.
No, to make a competition, you need to be affiliated, but doesn't prevent anybody to organize his own competition without the system. It's happened in a lot of sports. The trend today, the trend in sport, is to make, for example, biking, running, and a lot of things outside the scope.
Exactly.
And the struggle is how can we bring these people inside the system?
So the question then becomes, clubs, I don't know what your experience was in England when you were doing it. Are there a lot of people that enjoy the indoor experience as parts of clubs, or is it more of a solo activity?
I think if you take the journey of a child that's going to want to develop and train, you look at the kids that are in the competitions now. Actually, if they turn up at a venue like ours and want to have an experience, they do that, they have a great time. But how does that then develop into them coming back every week and really learning more to it than just having a bit of a fly with an instructor? So I think in order to make that happen, you have to have a supporting infrastructure for the people to be invited.
How do you encourage that? What is the best way to do that? Simon?
I'd start slightly differently.
Okay.
Sport is the very reason for our existence. passionately believe that without sport, we've just got a one and done adventure park. So for us to become a sustainable business, we have to become a sport. To create a sport, there's several ways in. You actually come in through the people who probably think they're doing a one and done or coming in for an experience. Nobody's going to go and learn indoor skydiving. Very, very few ever think that's going to be their path at the moment. Or they come in from the pro flyer area, which is through the skydiver route. So the skydivers are straight away buying bulk time. Let's put that to one side. That used to be 30% of the business. Most tunnels now, that's around 10% of the business. There are no more skydivers in the world materially than there were 15 years ago when we started. And now there's, instead of half a dozen tunnels, there's 150, 180 tunnels. So you can see that business is dissipating. So that means that for an operator, we have to have return flyers. So if we have to have return flyers, we have to start getting smart. And we have to start thinking about it. And there's all kinds of barriers to entry. And one of those barriers, Andre started it, which is the cost of practice. Just to be able to come in and practice, that means that you then need to start with community. Community means that you've got to start building clubs. Clubs means that you do recreational things. Recreational things mean that you're going to have people coming to you, which means that has to be some element of competition and gamification. Gamification is really difficult to do if you're a skier on your first 2 glides down a very green slope. And that's what people are coming to do when they first come to the tunnel. So somehow we have to take that. Now we do that through 2 different ways. One of them is personal competition, which is your flight certificate, which is how much did I achieve. We give them 10 things to try to do. And you can tick off 4 or 5, and they're almost irrelevant. The first one is I went to class. That's a tick, but it's moments of celebration. So what we're trying to do is give people moments of celebration. We're trying to get people hooked so they come back. When they come back, then we can start the clubs, the kids clubs, the regular flight clubs, and then they become recreational flyers. And then they will start to join the pro flyers in competitions. And the thing that we have done so badly as a tunnel industry, I believe, is grassroots competition. And the mere fact, I said, the mere fact that the national championships in America last week, 38% of the contestants were instructors and 33% were our employees. You're never going to sustain a sport if you don't open it up. So cost of practice. Sorry, I had a big ramble there, but
no, that's
there's a whole bunch of things that we need to look at.
You've opened up a lot of really
and
good
then format
questions.
becomes interesting.
Exactly.
So if we're going to go and say that, we'll aspire to 3D or belly flying with 6 hours, we're never going to crack it. So we've invented things called flight lights, which are gamification again, which you can do after about 8-10 minutes in the tunnel at a very basic level. And that's what we have to do as an industry, is create more of that stuff.
In other words, you've got to create your sport.
We do.
Right? Which is an exciting thing.
And that's what indoor climbing did as well.
Yeah, and which was before when we saw that, which if you go to a climbing center, at least my experience of going to climbing centers a few years ago, before they were Olympic, 7-10 years ago, I didn't see any of that. You saw people on climbing walls and you saw people bouldering. Simple as that.
So Jay, question for you. You went to the Wind Games over the weekend.
Yeah.
Had you got a clue what was going on?
Well, do you mean what
did you know?
The competitions?
Did you know who was winning and how and why? But when you went and saw the indoor climbing,
but that's easier to follow, obviously.
Of course, it's easier to follow. That's my point.
Yeah, exactly.
We have to make it easy to follow.
What affect you is when you hear this conversation about the future of whether it's a sport or not, how does that affect your thinking about where you want to go with your business?
I will give you a different story, because my personal journey in this business started from experience of body flying, actually. And I was not skydiver originally, so I did the first 5 years tunnel racing, and then we kind of created the tunnel competitions and the ways for people to grow and do something like, achieve some level, to get some silver badges, golden badges for something, for some particular achievement. So it kind of worked, but what I mentioned, the biggest problem for this industry is the price of the practice, yeah, and it slows everything down big way, yeah. But again, what I want to say, there is much more problems than this, yeah. Like you mentioned about the competition yesterday. When you go in, visibility, you cannot access to this tunnel, see what's happening. The glass is reflecting, so you don't see clearly what's going on in. You don't understand the rules. So these things, I think, are even major things, major problems for that sport. And my company has been involved in this show business, and I think we have to take lessons from the best in show business. And we used to work with Disney, and we was not able to bring in this kind of approach, to bring the wind tunnel in Disneyland. It was not simply possible, because I said, glass? No, how the people will see it, yeah? It's not possible to see. So the first thing we done, we got rid of the glass. But we still have to run 15 shows every day, so it has to be very rigid technology, fail-proof technology, and safe, yeah? So there was a lot of challenges to get to the point that it's visible, it's repeatable, and it's eye-catching, yeah? And when you have all these components in place, then you can start thinking about something pleasure to see, yeah? And you saw this climbing guys. It was fun to see, yeah? But there is not fun yet in the tunnel here. I think that's a major problem today.
Patrice.
Yeah, one point also, I'm talking on behalf of Federation who is handling that, but the cost, it's also a matter of which kind of product we develop. On our perspective of developing our sports, which is on our duty, we prefer to develop sports team rather than solo, because it's easy. If you have in the tunnel where you can put four people walking together, flat or in 3D, you cut the cost by 4. And if you have a big tunnel, then where you put 8 person, flat or in 3D, then you cut by 8, and so on. So it's easier for us to go in this direction, but we also we are afraid not to jeopardize the other aspect of the sport, which is a solo with incredible, because those people, I'm not coming from indoor, but those people are doing an incredible thing with their body. This is a mature sport with, they touch the sky even if they are indoor. In terms of control, body, they hit the wall, it could be very dangerous, and they are perfectly using all that, but on the same time, how can we bridge this gap? There is a recreational, how can we do that? In my opinion, we have to go in the direction of team, because the team will share the cost. If the owner they make an effort, and you have plenty of person doing that, then the club system, which in my country gets subsidies to promote and all that, if you include the youth also, it's going to be better to try to find a solution. It doesn't mean that it's going to be the best product, because the other topics. Is it understandable? I agree. Sometimes you don't really understand. I don't really understand the difficulty in climbing, and the climber is not going to understand what is a good or wrong wing, or wrong grip, sorry. The visibility, is it media friendly, and so on. The other topics, it's another story. To start from somewhere, I think that by sharing the time of the flight is better than to be only one person flying.
I think from the competition point of view, we've been a little bit disadvantaged by the fact that we've actually come from skydiving as an industry. You know, this all started because skydivers wanted to go indoors. Actually, if you looked at it fresh and said, how can we go from this new thing, you wouldn't actually come up with 4 ways of competition, for example, as a progression, because it's prohibitive. You've got to get 4 people, they've all got to have good commitment levels and good skill levels, and then there's the competition. Whereas something like with the gamification, the lights, those kinds of things, you can progress as a solo person, improve your skills, have those important features for competitive excitement, timing and achievement, and rating yourself against others. That could then progress onto something and evolve more into team stuff, which is great. But up until recently, actually, as an industry, we've not really had those progressional steps for the first person. So it was really a case of how do you get from being 0 to in a highly skilled team, and there was no way to bridge that gap.
I mean, you can see that down the line. You could imagine a situation where you have teams, where you have a sport that's exciting and fun to watch. You could have part of the cost offset by brands, maybe that want to get in to support the teams, to have real competition. A very attractive visually thing. But I get the impression that it's getting from 0, it's getting people from 0 to 100. As if 100 is where you have to be to create good, sustainable competition, that seems to be.
But I also think format-wise, those individual things have a lot more scope than probably some of the other stuff does. You know, if you look at 4 ways of competition for the skydivers, it's a great competition. They like it, they enjoy it. For somebody that's not aware of what's going on, not seen it before, it actually probably looks a little bit repetitive and probably not too stimulating. Then you look at something like dynamic flying, it's more visually appealing, and it's like, wow, there's a lot of flying going on. But then when it comes to actually trying to work out who's winning and how it's scored and whatever's going on there, you've even for someone like myself that's been in the industry a long time, I'm looking at it going, I've got no idea whether that was the right move or the wrong move, because you've got to be so detailed and complex. So looking for different format options, I think, is definitely a way to help that progression from 0 to competitive, but then also to make it more appealing for the spectator audience. You know, watching the speed climbers go up the wall is exciting. You can see who got there first. I've got a winner, on to the next battle, and you don't really have that at the moment, which is where I think the opportunity is. Is
it just a question of coming up with being imaginative, or how much thought have you given this in your organization, Simon? I mean, is this something you think about? Like, what would be a good sport competition?
Yes, we do, and right now we're in the middle of a complete rethink. I would say. I think it's fair to say. You know, I'm definitely pushing much more of the grassroots competition. I want the weekly competitions. You know, you look at every sport. They're played on soccer fields or rugby pitches or whatever, and in villages and small towns all over the world. You know, small courts, basketball, you know, gyms in villages or whatever. That's where all these sports come from. And so for us, we have to do much more of that, and that's where the club nights are so important, with an element of competition, even if it's just at the end of the night. And that moments of celebration, who was talking about the badges, and you know, we do a wing system and badges and things. So it's all about that. And the great thing is we get people young. And when we started this industry, we weren't thinking like that. All of the people who were competing were much older because they were the skydivers. And so they had already got, you know, they were all over 18 anyway, and they'd all got a bunch of jumps, and they were all seeing this as their future. And a lot of the tunnels that are built were built by skydivers. They weren't built by business people or people looking to put them in really attractive places to general population. We've got a lot of tunnels and a lot of obscure places, and that's because that's where skydivers were, or that's where skydivers' homes were. So there's a lot of that. And the other big thing that I think we have to develop, which every other sport has done, and indoor climbing will be doing really well at the moment, is developing heroes. And I follow a drone racing league, not because I'm particularly interested in watching it, but I'm interested to see how they develop that sport. The same with robot wars or battle bots. And what they've done is they've taken some really nerdy people, like computer geeks almost, and they've started creating the backstory. And they've started, and that's where, you know, talking to Hagen about the World Games and the way that they do that is the human interest story. We forget to do that. We don't do that very well. And until we create heroes that people on the street can identify with, then it's really hard. I want to go do that. I want to emulate that. And so we're a long way from the tipping point, and that's all the work that we need to do. It's a big struggle.
Ivars.
Yeah, I want to add to this point something from my experience. And there is 2 points actually. The first point is that about the cost of the practice. The cost is coming from actually two major things. Yeah? The first thing is actually the cost of the machinery, which is obviously very big. Yeah? And the second thing is the cost of instructors, because the staff is a second major expense. And I want to point attention to yesterday's competition and the guy who won the freestyle. The guy who won the freestyle, the Toms, he's also from Latvia. And I remember him coming in from breakdance, and he was practicing on a very small, tiny tunnel, 1.6 meters. Yeah? And today he's a world best player. And look to this as because the industry is, I feel it's kind of laughing about small tunnels, but I think we have to stop laughing about small tunnels, because these small tunnels are actually the way to achieve a cheap entry point. Yeah? And also for kids, you know, it's fine. We used to rent this small tunnel, 1.6 meter, to Korea. It was next to a science center, yeah? And kids was flying tandems there, 1.6 meter. Yeah? So that's another thing we kind of need to join this effort and you know, see this as an industry, because from small tunnel, one day the champion will come, which happened yesterday.
So that's my point about going back into the villages and the small gyms and the small stadium and the small soccer pitches. And we have to open up the tier 2 and tier 3 markets of the wind tunnels. So we need to be able to go to small towns. And it'll come as no surprise that we're launching 2 new models very quickly, right now, at the moment, which will take us into the cheaper market. But the big thing for us now, of course, all of us in the industry, is safety, health and safety. If you're opening up your sport to everybody from 3 to 103, you have to be safe. When you fly, we fly as a company 2 million people a year. So when you're designing, you don't design for the 1 in a million chance. You design for the 1 in the 10 million chance, or whatever, of things going wrong. So we're now going ASTM ratings and all that sort of thing. So that our whole industry is changing. And more to the point, people are demanding that we change. You know, the health and safety bodies of this world, nothing, you can't get away with anything anymore. And as an old skydiver from many years back, you know, risk was something I loved. I was doing all kinds of crazy shit. So the idea of health and safety never ever entered my brain in terms of running an organization. And now it's the number one thing. You have to think about that.
Is this a big element in your federation? In the official view of
yeah,
of
we
things?
have not yet found a solution, but we know that because the outdoor is developed about the club system and the drop zone themselves, and but we are quite optimistic, because we know that some owners of drop zone, which are mainly association, or mainly 50% of them are associations, so a non-profit, they welcome some small tunnels, mobile small tunnels. In some drop zone, it's possible to share that for recreational when the weather is not good. Also, with the link of the next matter, number 3, regarding the instructor and all that, which is another tool to create the entity around the club itself, which a club could develop both outdoor and indoor. It's also one of the aim. And we know that if we are going to be successful if we have a pure indoor or bodyfly, whatever you call, a pure club for that. Right now we are not successful to reach this goal, but we think that one of the possibilities to bridge this gap is to do that as well. On the other side, we have not to forget what's going on in the society. For example, the small tunnel, mobile tunnel, which could be more popular because it's mobile by itself, could be moved from a place to another one, are not really green friendly. They are a little bit more noisy, and right now it's sometimes...
Okay, we're sorting that out. It's all right.
You understand?
We got it
Roughly, you understand what I mean, which is sometimes not easy to bring them in the middle of the village, where you can promote it by making a competition, which is also possible, like you said, going in the middle of a place and make a grassroots competition. It's a more better tool than a wind tunnel like here, or like in iFLY Paris, or wherever else. When it's a static one, it's in a building. You bring the people, a mobile, you bring the tunnel to the people, which is a little bit different.
So in terms of the production of these smaller tunnels, is that something that's on the cards for your organization? Is that something you want to be doing more of, or?
Okay, my organization actually started with doing these small ones, yeah, but you know, when you're growing your company, you kind of start feeling shame about your small ones and then cheap ones, yeah, because you know there is iFLY, you know, it's luxury, and you're still driving this small car, yeah. And we kind of forgot about them, yeah. And then till 2016, actually, the big tunnels was growing steadily, yeah. And after 2016, the big tunnels start to drop. That's according to statistics, what I know, yeah. And actually, the small tunnels right now are growing a huge way, yeah. And first of all, I would say that's not true that the open tunnel is always noisy. Yeah? We can make it less noisy than the enclosed ones. So just for reference, in our new open tunnels, you don't need earplugs anymore. And you can talk with FLY. So that's a big advancement, which is happening right now as I speak. But of course, Simon was right about the safety issues. You know, we gone 15 years from very dangerous machines to the machines we have today. And I can say we don't have accidents. Yeah? And we haven't got any bad accident during this duration of 15 years. So it's achievable. It's about mindset. You know, we need to think together how to change it, and maybe more manufacturers can start competing in this field, in the small tunnel field, to mature the technology, to make it, you know, for everybody.
You know, Roland, or David, we had the video also for the iFLY video as well, no? Shouldn't this be a good time, I think, to show that, because Simon, it's a bit about how you are reaching out to the market with some of the promotion that you've done, and I'm wondering if afterwards we could talk about how this relates to some of the things we've been saying. So can we put that on?
Ignition sequence starts. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running.
It's time to rise above the ordinary. Choose to fly. iFLY.
So, they're very attractive, I mean, obviously, and done at a very high, with a high level of polish. The message there, the choose to fly, that's an initial give it a go message. Is that correct? And that's basically to get people to try it.
Not necessarily.
Okay.
It's quite weird watching that video, actually, because that's actually the reason that I'm the CEO. Because the last CEO came in and did all that. and in America, we, funnily enough, I've been running the international tunnels for years. I was a buyer of a tunnel. I raised the money for a tunnel. So I've done every part of the tunnel industry. I've sold my tunnels, I've sold private tunnels, I've sold public tunnels. And in America, we got to the stage where we were getting big, and in 2016, we built 20 tunnels in a year. And the founder, Alan, who I was then a partner with, I was the very small partner of the business, he said he was going to be out in 2018. And so we'd brought a new chief exec in who'd come from actually Weight Watchers. And he was a big company chief exec, and his whole thing was all about heat up the brand and about the return flyer. And he totally forgot where we came from. And you saw that first imagery of those people walking in. If ever there was a politically correct piece of imagery, that was it. We had all race, all color, all religion, able-bodied, disabled, the whole lot. It was just all too perfect. And we lost, you know, as you said, it was very high-end and glossy, but there was no eye contact. We'd lost that whole thing. And our same-store sales, which is, you know, the tunnels that have been operating for more than a year, and you look at their revenue each year was going down and down. And there's all kinds of reasons for it, but mainly because we lost the plot. as a company, and in America. And I don't connect overly well with that. I think it's great, and I think there's some lovely imagery about it, as you say, and you do need that aspirational part of the imagery as well. But at the same time, that's getting away from grassroots, and I want to take it to grassroots.
So what is a grassroots message? I mean, for any of you, what would be something where you think, that's where I want to pitch it? What kind of message is that? What kind of story is that?
Competition and community. So competition, whether it's with myself or with Paul or anybody else, and community. And it's quite difficult to run community inside a tunnel compared to a drop zone. On a drop zone, you can spend, hours and hours between jumps, drinking tea, cold weather. It's a fantastic embedded community. As I was saying, I don't know, you in a good week you might have done 100 jumps, did you, in a training camp with 2 rigs and not much community? But he'd have turned up, before breakfast on Monday morning, he can do 100 jumps in a tunnel. And that's the difference. So it's really hard to keep that community. You don't have that thing. So building community is important.
Yeah, it's like the golf club. If you're playing 18 holes, I mean, it takes
a lot of time
it's a
to
whole
chat.
day. Yeah, there's a lot. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
It's just not a problem about our community, it's a social problem everywhere. When I was saying that it fits the millennial wishes, which after the works, they can make flight. When you fly, after that you go to go back home to take care about your children, if you have children, to take care about your family. Those who are really in a hurry, always in a hurry, may have satisfaction by doing body fly or indoor skydiving. If you go outside, then you must be prepared to be patient. This is a school of patience, where you have time to socialize, you have time to meet all together, to have a beer or else, and to spend time, and probably to miss it, to go back home, which is it's another society. And those skydivers who have built wind tunnel and those who run a wind tunnel like a drop zone are very few. But because their customers are not used with that.
But this is one of the areas where you were talking before about where there is an possible cross-section, intersection between the indoor and the outdoor is in this community space.
And it's a really interesting one. When you watch the pro flyers come from one direction and the recreational flyers come from another direction, they're quite intimidated by the pro flyers. And very few of them go from recreational to really joining that group, because that group is really practicing for their other sport. Whereas these people only know this sport at this stage. Now, some of them go off to skydive, but very few of them, and some of them go off and try it, are really amazing at it for the time that they've got, but actually don't really like skydiving for a bunch of other things. Often the fear factor and the adrenaline factor, it's just a different sport. So there's not a big, I've found personally in my life, of operating a lot of tunnels, there's not a lot of, they touch, but they don't really integrate.
So
there's some examples.
So building that community, is it clubs? Is it, how do you get to energize a community or get a community engaged? Competition you mentioned, is there a way to, is it teams? Is it?
I think you've got to take those individual visitors and give them exposure to something that's wider, whether that's a club at a single location or a league that crosses many locations. And this is one of the areas where probably manufacturers and operators can really look and say, well, actually, we need to come up with a commonality across this so that there is a competition where at the end of every Wednesday I can go and compete against somebody that's in America and I'm in the UK, or see where I rank in that global scale. And if there are commonalities amongst some of the gamification pieces, for example, timed things, solo things that happen across the board, then it makes that possible. Whereas if you've just got one tunnel over there, which is I've created a twister game and we do it like this, and over there they've created a lights thing where you just have to do this. then there isn't that commonality and it removes that possibility. So this is where I think the opportunity is to create that wider community and create a sport that then has that possibility for growth.
I'm aware I would like to try to get us back on some sort of schedule that works. I'm wondering if anyone in the audience would like to ask a question or make a comment here, because there are a lot of interesting things said that I think this panel is getting right to the core of so much of what this gathering is about. Is there anyone who'd like to put up their hand and make a comment? No? Not yet? All right, well, we'll have plenty of time to talk to the people when you meet them over lunch. But when we look at this, where things are going forward, I'm wondering if there's also a dimension of being able to use technology and digital to reach outside of your tunnels, to be able to find different ways to engage through online or even competition that's remote or something like that. Is that something that could theoretically be possible? I mean, is there a way to use, how do you use, when we were speaking before, you said you think of digital, you think of e-marketing, you think of e-commerce. How does that work with sport and what you're doing?
Can you give a sample?
Yeah, you want to?
Or you go?
No.
Okay, I can give you one sample, which was quite a big one in my life. Yeah, I told you I started as an entertainment facility, and my objective was to be operator. And then suddenly I got a call from a big show saying, "Oh, we might have we might need the machine in a big show." Yeah, and it appeared to be Olympic Games. Yeah, so we came from operator, we adapted the machine and put it on a big stage. It was 2006 Torino Olympics, yeah. So I'm probably the only guy in this room who actually has performed in Olympics as a performer, yeah. And it immediately created a very, very wide spread of this message, yeah. Because before that it was very, very hidden sport, yeah. Mm-hmm. And don't take me wrong, I don't think this sport is popular right now, yeah. It's very niche sport at the moment, yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, so it's not comparable. Soccer, for example, yeah. So and I think if you go to public and with a big event, what my company does, yeah, in a movies or things like that, it gets a lot of exposure, and that's the Olympics alone gave 500 million views, just one show. And I remember the previous owner of iFLY was calling me after the Olympics. You're the guy who made my business so great, yeah. Because all of manufacturers, all of us will benefit from this exposure, yeah, and which happened after the Olympics. So we can do it again and again, you know.
And there was a partnership, in effect, with the Torino Olympics. I mean, between your sport.
It was not sport.
Yeah. No, but but I mean, it was the sport. It was indoor wind tunnel, and.
No, but it was a spectacle.
No. It was a spectacle, right.
Yeah. Where I'm heading, I'm not heading to the sport, yeah, because every sport starts with some desire to do something, right? Mm-hmm. So if you see something amazing, wow, the guys are flying finally, yeah, that's amazing. I want to be part of that, yeah. And this is how you get this, contact with the sport as it is, to get inspiration. To be willing to be...
Our challenge at the moment is that most of our publicity is coming out of spectacles. And Ivars started the first big one with the Torino Games. We were on America's Got Talent, which was huge. There's the one that went from the Wind Games a couple of years ago, I think got, someone said at the time, 20 million hits, maybe 100 million hits. Now, but it's still, somebody's looking at it not for the sport, but they're looking at it for the spectacle. And you go onto TikTok, and most videos on TikTok have got 5 million hits or whatever. So it's not difficult to get lots of social media. It's getting sustained contact with communities that matters, and so there's a development that has to go on, I think, certainly in bringing this competition through maybe some kind of apps or applications that then go social and things like that. So technology that sounded a bit half-assed, so I really didn't know what I was talking about. And that's because that technology really needs to be developed.
Yeah,
and
we're in a startup,
Yeah.
a world of startups now. So
Yeah.
it's probably the potential to explore ways of...
There's
of
various
doing
apps
it.
and things around there, but we haven't built something compelling yet.
How about the idea of, because you mentioned the Olympics, but it was a spectacle. But how about the idea of partnering with completely different sports as a way for them to maybe expand what it is that they do for their partners or whatever, whether it's football or basketball or whatever, where it might be some kind of a join-up that you could do that would... Have you ever had conversations, or is there any interest on their part? Or?
Yeah, we do. I think there's three different ways into sport, and the first one is through things like X Games, World Air Games, things like that, which is more about the adrenaline side of the sport. The one that we always talk about is Olympic glory, and we all want, everybody would like to go into the Olympics, and these aren't mutually exclusive, by the way. And the third way is to go do what MMA, WWE have done, where you go and own your own sport.
Exactly, top to bottom.
And that, I think, is potentially the most lucrative for us. And I don't mean lucrative financially, I mean lucrative in actually turning our sport on, where we have to go out and start turning on an interesting spectacle, which is sporting and is competitive and does have results, but it can be partly demonstration, where we can also get our media rights and get ourselves onto some kind of TV channel, where we start getting into really professional hosts of shows. So you have, the main host and commentators and specialist subject people. At the moment, we're doing it all in-house, and it sounds as though we're in-house, talking to ourselves. And most of the social media we're doing is amongst ourselves. And what we have to do is pull in the social media of everybody else, so they spread the word for us. It's no good us just posting social media to ourselves again. This summit, no doubt, will be really well known amongst the community. But actually, we need to get it out of the community. That's what we need to do.
It's interesting you mentioned UFC because, this morning when I made some comments, but then I got carried away with the Super Bowl and so on, I originally had written something about UFC. Because UFC is a really interesting model, but you mentioned something very interesting, which is creating a sport. Creating a sport. When UFC started, and Roland will remember, the guys who started early UFC, even before they had the brand, had this fantastic idea: we're going to put two guys in a cage, and there won't be any rules, and they'll beat each other's brains out, and the last guy standing wins. And they said, isn't that a great idea? And then they went and talked to broadcasters, and people said, well, you can't do that. I mean, you have to have a sport, and you have to have rules, and you have to have something real, and you have to have safety considerations, and you have to have medical commission. And these guys who then made UFC what it is now, then went away, and they invested in actually creating, which I know you're well aware of, a sport that you could then own top to bottom and have something really
It's really
valuable.
difficult getting the blood off the glass in the tunnel.
Yeah, no, that would be a good one.
We have thought about staging fights in the tunnel. Why not?
But the principle is of owning the governance of a sport is
highly attractive.
It's very, very attractive, and it's just having that. The fighting one actually is the fighting was the easy one, isn't it? You just put two guys in there, and
put them in sumo
really
suits
primal.
if you're worried.
But it's not as simple as the guys who originally had the idea thought it was.
Well, they
right?
were hitting each other with chairs, and that's what UFC did. They brought all these disparate operators together, and we are a bunch of disparate operators, and both as manufacturers and as operators. And that's why this summit, I think I speak for a lot of people here. Who here knows what the objective of this summit is? Put your hand up if you do. So one person put their hand up. And that to me is actually a good thing that it doesn't have to have an objective. The objective is that all these people, without knowing why they're coming here, came here because we would like to see this industry go somewhere. That to me is important.
That's good, and I'm very pleased to hear that. Something else that you mentioned there when you're talking about disparate organizations. You know, UFC was created by different participants or people who practice different sports. You had the karate guy, you had the Thai boxing guy, you had the jiu-jitsu guy, you had the boxing, and they came in to compete against each other on the basis of who was better. Ultimately, out of that grew MMA, which is now a recognized sport in France, if I'm not mistaken, right? Didn't they just get recognized?
Well, in few weeks.
Not quite.
In few weeks. Yeah.
Right. I've also heard some people say they're a little bit disappointed that, you know, you don't have the fun of seeing if the karate guy can beat the judo guy, you know, as much anymore because it's become more homogenized.
You put the finger in an area which you need to understand how it works, how the sports are managed in France compared to the other country. This is why there is a control on that. This is why we spend time before going in the direction, just because we know also where MMA came from. I mean, you are very gentle with MMA, but on the beginning, it started from the dark side where people they were fighting with no rules, with no condition, with no safety, and well, the promotion of that was, well, if we catch this guy and make them all together under the rules, then we can create something. And that's promoter, we did that, not sportsman, promoter. The sportsman, they still prefer to fight in the street. If you go in the website and you make a street fight, that is more popular than MMA. That's a reality, and this is a fact. That's big. After that, a big marketing, of course, a big business plan and all that. With no doubt, make it more popular right now because you have the channel of that. But this is the reason why in France we were careful about adding the MMA, because the MMA, they create a system, but they are also under the same system as the other sports, the drug control, for example, which is very, very important in their development. Not on the beginning, but now it's very, very important. And they are really following that, which now it's a signal that we are a normal sport, in brackets, a sport which is able to follow some rules. So within the rule, there is a safety. So then, well, in our country, then the doors are still open.
I think that, as I said before, we like to try to stay on, get back on track. We have another panel that's beginning, which we can jump right into. I'd like to thank the people on this one for doing a really good job, and thank you, Simon, for that comment about the summit. Very good. Thank you, and now we'll move to the next one, but we need to switch.